how can we ever truly consent to something we've never tried before and don't know if we're going to like it or dislike it? How could you say with absolute certainty that you're informed? If you had known that it would have gone wrong, maybe you wouldn't have said yes. So, working within your own zones of risk tolerance. And it's not all or nothing, there's usually a lot of gray area.
Welcome to Come Talk with Aimee, the podcast where sex isn't whispered about, it's talked about out loud. I'm Aimee, your host and intimacy coach, here to spark raw, playful, and unfiltered conversations about relationships, desire, and everything in between. No shame, no scripts, just real talk about what really turns us on. Let's dive in. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Come Talk with Aimee. Yes, we have Rae Szereszewski with us today. Rae is a certified sex educator in addition to her experience as a latex designer. What? She spent 8 years creating sex-positive events at Oasis Aqualounge, a lifestyle club, and has worked in a variety of roles in event planning, community building, mentorship, and project coordination. We love a multifaceted person. Yes. Drawing on her lived experience as a former latex designer and swingers club event coordinator, Rae offers real-world education on consent, kink, consensual non-monogamy, and pleasure. Yes, 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 Rae, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Me as well. Oh my God. We will be digging into the latex design because what a fucking fabulous experience that we just need to delve into. And it goes into our topic today. But before we get into our topic, Rae, I want to know what is making you hot and bothered lately?
All I want to talk about is off campus. Can we please talk about off campus?
Yes, get into it.
I watched the first episode and I was like, this show's going to be amazing. But even in the first episode, I was like, oh, the real fantasy here is that a university level American hockey team cares this much about consent and female pleasure. Wow. What a nice thing to see is representation on TV of like an imagined world where this is a thing. Because we had that hockey scandal here in Canada a year or two ago. So I was like, oh, what a dream. So that was amazing. And every single character, the ones that you're like, as soon as you're worried I'm about to be disappointed in one of these hockey bros, you're not. And they handle sexual assault so carefully and so in a way that centers the person who was the victim of sexual assault, like their wants, their desires, their needs, their story in a way that wasn't trauma porn. And then it also dealt with abusive relationships in a way that was also accurate. I'm going to spoil something. So if anyone doesn't want spoilers, they're going to have to deal with it. But the part where he goes for dinner at his dad's and then he sees, and his dad's like, I've changed. And he's like, I'm engaged and I really want you to meet the woman. And Garrett, our main character, is like, it's been 6 months. And I'm like, oh, they're giving you clues that the pattern is actually continuing. They're giving you they're doing an accurate portrayal of what this looks like. And then when they're at dinner and he sees she's wearing long sleeves and all this other stuff. And it was just an accident. And he goes, he will never change. And she's like, it's complicated. And she's still with him in the end. Everything about that, I was like, oh my God, really great. This is getting all of the signs to look for in a way that isn't, once again, trauma porn. It was amazing. It was all about the victim's trauma response. And I was like, and then it was hot on top of that. It was a sexy show on top of that.
And not victim blaming, because a lot can be victim blaming. So I thought it did, a really good justice and job of explaining these more intricate, delicate topics and advocating for those who have experienced it, right? So I think it did a really great job. And that whole jock narrative, right? A scene that I feel like nobody is talking about, but I want to do a reel on is the Thanksgiving dinner where all of the guys, the jocks, are in the kitchen figuring out the dinner and all of the girls are sitting on the couch.
Yes.
Chatting.
Oh my God, amazing.
When do you ever see that? Yes, yes, yes. More of that, please.
I also just, the idea that you have these different characters and because I read so much romance, I'm like, oh, each of these characters gets their own book, but you're being introduced to them all and their unique personalities here in this one scene. The one who loves to cook, they themselves are more than just hockey. And I'm sure I was watching Off Campus with a male friend of mine, and we're watching the scene at the Halloween party where Allie is dancing as J-Lo and Dean sees it. And at the end, he's like, wait, was that bad consent? Because he went up to her and when, it was all about sex. And then when she made it clear she didn't want to hook up with him, he walked away or he stayed there and went to another girl. I'm like, no, no, because you're thinking from swinger mindset. I'm like, I understand in the context of what you're thinking, why you would think that. I'm like, this was actually perfect visual body language consent. She's sexy. She's dancing. He comes up. He's a little close. She dances a little, and then she, with her body, breaks contact, shakes her finger, and he keeps the distance, and then she walks away, and he does not follow. He respects her no, both her physical breaking of contact, shaking her finger, and then physically exiting the dance floor, right? That is responding to a non-verbal no. And I'm like, ugh, I want every single teenager to watch Heated Rivalry, but like in a media literacy class. Like if I could teach high school and all we did was, I mean, we can't watch Heated Rivalry, but these things would not be allowed for high school. But if all we could do was teach high school, where every day of class you watch an episode and then the next day you discuss what did it do? What was the body language? What was consent? Why did this feel good? What felt good about this and why? And teach them what to look for with these visual examples. I'm thrilled.
It would be a very productive sexual ed class.
Yeah, I've had to explain to so many people when I say I teach sex ed to adults, they're like, oh, they don't know how to have sex. I'm like, no, sex ed for adults is primarily relationship ed, but you don't call it relationship ed. That's not what we call it. It's not just here's how you do safer choking and here's the risk profile. It's also what does it mean to want to be choked? What kind of trust do you need to build? How are you communicating with your partner about that? Are you actually interested in doing that with this person or are you doing it because they're interested in it? And how do you make sure that you're caring for yourself and this person no matter what role you're in by doing this kind of an act together? And intimacy, is there a deeper bond that's being created by this? And are you prepared for that when this is just quote unquote a play partner? So sex ed could be, kink ed could be, here's how you do safer choking. But the way that I think about it is if you're an adult doing this, what are all the things that you need to know? And it's very relationship focused because we're doing this in relationship with each other.
Absolutely. It's so layered. And speaking of layers, please tell us a little bit about your background in latex design. I am so fascinated.
Yeah, I would love to tell you about that. I went to school for fashion design. My actual bachelor degree is in fashion design. And I, very, very young, like from a teenager, was like, I'm interested in sex and the world of sex as an industry. And so when I was in university for fashion design, I was like, how can I be involved in this sex industry without being a sex worker? Let's try fetish wear. Let's try latex. So I marched my little 18, 19-year-old body off to a latex 101 class and then got an internship and then started working on it for myself. I was like 19 years old and like terrified to go fetish clubbing. And then my bosses took me and then I went and I was like, oh, it's a dance party with better outfits and someone's being spanked in the corner. This is so not scary. I don't know why I thought this was going to be a big deal. And my bosses also were teaching me the power of a strong no. Literally, someone came up to me on the dance floor and was like, I can eat you out right here. And I was like, I have a boyfriend. And they looked at me and they were like, that's not a no, not in this community. You didn't say no. And I was like, oh, interesting.
And you didn't say yes either.
I didn't, but that's also a generational difference. And I think that that's really important to understand is that they were in their 40s when I was in my 20s back in the mid 2000s. So what they were raised with as best practices of consent was not yes means yes. It was a verbal clear no. So they were expressing this cultural difference, I think, in a way that was still very much about them trying to promote consent and autonomy and empowerment to the best of their ability. But anyway, so that was me. That was me in university. And then I left. And my personal problem, I was always a size 8 on pant size. So mid-size, 5'2", smaller side of mid-size, I would say. And despite being that, being a busty, curvy, has fat on her body, even when she worked out kind of mid-sized person, clothing in general, fetish wear in general, does not fit. It's made for B cups. All fashion industry is made for a B cup. So if you're a D or a double D, or in my case, an EF, those tops, those tiny little tops and corset tops, they're not going to fit and they don't look pornographically sexy. Your side boob spillage looks like an overflow of armpit fat. I don't care what people say, right? It was unpleasant. And like, here's these low rise jeans that just don't fit my body. So I thought, okay, well, I want to feel good in what I'm wearing. So I'm going to only work in custom. After school, I went and I interned at a company called Fantastic Rubber in Germany for a few months where they taught me how to do custom cat suits. And then I brought that information back and I've still amended it because I didn't like their fit is very popular and people like their stuff, but I didn't like it for me and my body. So then I learned how to tweak it for like, what do I like? How do I want it to fit? How do you adapt this for each individual person? How do you take measurements and show someone how to take their measurements to get that fit that they're looking for? I do mandatory mock-ups. And because I was doing all of that, the price was quite high. And so I mostly just pattern draft for another company right now. No one ever actually orders latex from me anymore. So I just make really cute pieces for me now and make a bit of extra cash doing the pattern drafting for a local company.
I mean, hello, amazing skills to have for yourself. Yes.
Well, I was going to say I have this horrible habit of doing values-based work where I'm like, well, my value is body positivity and inclusion in the fetish world. Therefore, I have priced myself out of actually being able to sell latex fetish wear.
That's amazing. Yeah. Your quality control is a little too much quality, right?
Yeah, or even just, the people also don't understand that latex to a certain extent is a luxury good. And even off the rack, because the cost of the materials is so much higher than what you're getting in a store, and it must be hand done. There's no machine that can do it for you. So there's not really cost cutting. You can't get AI to do it for you, and you can't get a machine to do it automatically. So because of that, you're paying for handmade labor with a high cost of goods piece. And so when you're asking for something custom made on top of that, that does mean you have to pay the materials and the time for mock-ups, and you have to pay the material and time for alterations. And I actually hate doing alterations in latex because you risk the integrity of the entire garment. So I would rather do 1 or 2 or 3 simplified mock-ups that if they fit, the person gets to keep, and then one final piece that's perfect, than have to alter something and then accidentally rip a giant hole in it.
Yeah, I hear that. And it's amazing that you had experience in Berlin too. Talk about latex mecca and kink mecca as well.
Oh man, I went to a party there once. I talk about this all the time. I went to this hotel takeover kink party with the person that I was working for, and they have this one clubbing night, and it's at this massive warehouse. I don't know if this warehouse is like, I think it was like an event venue that they do for these kinds of raves. I don't even know where I am. I barely spoke the language. By the end of it, I could say how to take your measurements in German, and that was it. And I'm lost. Please help. So I'm at this place. Every single room in this massive warehouse is different. So there's the fashion show room with one music, and then there's the other room with the other music. And you get a stamp card and you get it stamped. You get clips every time you get a drink, and then you just pay on your way out. It was so cool. The playroom had Egyptian themed play furniture, gold, statues. It felt so luxurious. The basement had this one room that had coffins for tables and a giant crucifix from when they actually had a chapel from when steelworkers died, apparently, when it was back in the day. And I'm standing there with my German coworker, and she stands there and she goes, ugh, this party's boring. This isn't that exciting. We should go. And I'm just sitting here like it is 2:30 in the morning. No one is saying last call. You've got a goth basement crucifix room. You've got multiple rooms to choose from, all of which are fetish friendly, and you're bored. All right, let's go back and go swim in our cat suits in the hotel.
You're like, why not? Yeah, I know. That's funny, right? When it's commonplace, it's easy to get bored, but
I'm like, you do not know how good you have it here in Europe.
yeah, you're like, enjoy it, please.
Yeah.
And then I'd love to hear more about your working in lifestyle clubs too. What brought you into that scene?
So do you remember how I said I had an internship in university? So that meant I was an unpaid, like I was being paid in education. That's very much how internships worked back then. I don't know if that's changed. And I had to do a mandatory 200 hours to graduate. So that was unpaid labor. I needed a part-time job. So I said to my bosses, man, even McDonald's isn't hiring me because they know I'm a university student who's going to leave. And they went, why don't you apply to Oasis Aqualounge? You'd love it there. And I was like, what's Oasis? And they're like, it's a sex club. You'll be great. You'll be flirty. It'll be a good job for you. So I went, okay. And I applied the next day and got an interview and went, shit, I should probably check that place out. So I tell all my friends I have this job interview at a sex club. They're like, well, we're not letting you check it out alone as a woman. So all of my female friends rallied. There was like 5 of us. And we're like, we're going to go together. So we went that night for the Student Monday because they had Student Mondays back then. And we went and it was mind blowing. They walk in and they're like, no one can touch you without your consent. Anything but a yes is a no. There is no racism, sexism, or homophobia allowed here. No photography, no videography. You can be fully naked and no one will touch you. And that's when I realized, oh, this is great. We were like in bikinis or like quasi naked. And it was the most comfortable we'd ever felt in a public social setting in our lives. So of course, the next day is my interview. And the owner's like, have you been here before? I'm like, yeah. And he's like, what did you think? And I was like, I love it. I've never felt safer. And he's like, great, you're hired. So I worked the front desk, the daytime shift. People don't think of a sex club as having daytime shifts, but this club is open at the time from 11 a.m. until 3 a.m. Now it's, I think, 1 p.m. to 3 a.m. So I was working the day shift and I was the person saying anything but a yes is a no. And let me get you a locker key and a towel. And, let me know if you need a tour. And then eventually that transitioned to me running an event called Gangbang Night, or helping to run an event called Gangbang Night, which was about women who wanted to experience pleasure with multiple men at the same time. And doing that in a safe space where people are going to keep an eye out and there are consent monitors and it's sex positive and no one's shaming you for it is very hard to find. So that event was built for that. And my job was actually to run social icebreaker games. So I wasn't necessarily facilitating the gangbangs, I was running the social games, the competitions, the
What
icebreakers.
often happens at the beginning of play parties that there is this social hour. People don't realize that you have this opportunity to be social, to have icebreakers, to get to know each other with clothes on,
Yeah.
usually, right?
Well, I was gonna say this place is fairly unique in that our icebreakers were more like, I want you to picture like overnight camp or like day camp, those kinds of games, but you're naked. So we would do like banana blowjob competitions with prizes. One of our competitions was like a game called Get Your Socks Off that I learned from the teenagers I was working with at my job, which was like a Jewish youth group. Then I was lying to them about my involvement with Oasis. And so they taught me this game that's like, you wrestle and the first person to get a sock off wins. And I was like, oh, we're going to do this naked. And I threw that in and it was really fun. Those were the games that I was running. Because of that, people would come not just for the gangbang, it was drawing in women who maybe weren't as interested in gangbangs, but were interested in that fun, friendly social atmosphere. And that meant that there was more women there on this event. And it made the other women who were there for gangbang feel safer because there's more women in general. And it's not just like 5 women interested with like 50 men. So all of that was so fun. And so eventually, when I was like, I want to be a sex educator, I can't work with teenagers and not be allowed to talk about sex ed anymore. I left that job and then became what was supposed to be the full-time event coordinator at Oasis. And then the pandemic hit, and I ended up running virtual events with them and building up online community through virtual events and virtual icebreaker games and all of that. So that's how I got involved at the sex club. That was a very long-winded way of saying I ran events at a sex club.
Yes, no, give us the deets. We love it. We love it. We love it. I love that you've had all of this early exposure earlier than other people. You mentioned like, working in latex as
18, 19 years old. Yeah.
has that shaped with the latex, with working at the sex club, shaped your foundations and understanding of sexuality versus the traditional 20 something year old?
Yeah, I'm honestly so glad that I had those experiences because I'm that weird person being like, you've got to hang out at the sex club. Specific though, not all sex clubs feel the same. And I will say that some sex clubs have consent policies that are not aligned with the consent practices by the people who show up at the sex clubs. That's like a different conversation entirely. But I would honestly say though, being in spaces that were sex positive, anti shame, everything's normal as long as everyone feels respected. STIs are something we talk about openly. They're not something we feel ashamed of. What does embodied consent look like and feel like? How do we navigate sexual experiences in a highly sexually charged environment? And working at the sex club introduced me to asexual people because asexual people at that particular venue that I worked felt more comfortable there because their people knew what asexuality was and their no would be respected. They felt like they could hang out and be social and be themselves and be neurodivergent and kind of goth or whatever they wanted to be, or just have conversations with people. And when they said no, they would be believed. And so that was my first experience meeting someone who was
I
ace,
love that. That's
right?
empowering, right?
Yeah. And so I think more young people should be in these spaces that are highly sexual and consent based because that's where you learn what respect looks like and feels like.
Absolutely. And like you mentioned, you need to find the environments that are centering consent, are centering safety and allowing like let your freak flags fly, right? But in a consensual way, because not every sex space. And also, I loved that you were talking about fun games and making it approachable, right? And making people comfortable. And those are key things when you're looking for kink spaces, right? Because not all kink spaces are built the same. Not everyone's looking at consent the same. So, people at home, when you are looking for these kink friendly spaces, definitely, want to prioritize that. And so, on that note, can you take us more on this journey of kink and risk? Like when we talk about risk in kink, what are the different layers that people need to understand beyond just safe or unsafe?
Yeah. Well, I think let's start by what do we even mean by risk? Because I think when people hear risk, they mean physical risk. Choking is a really good example of something that has genuine life threatening consequences. like the risk of choking gone wrong is death. That is a high risk kind of act. So when we are thinking about risk, we are thinking about what are the physical risks that are both short term and potentially long term, and what can I do to reduce that risk or make it feel safe for me to be able to engage in this if I want to. And is this something that to me is outside of my risk tolerance, which means I don't want to do this? So, some people who are into the idea of choking because of the power play involved, you don't need to choke. A strong hand placed on the throat that's not restricting can give you that same feeling of power. They could choke me if they wanted to, but other people are into asphyxiation. And if that's the case, then a hand on the throat isn't going to do that. But then we need to talk about the safety considerations like every time you black out, there's cell death in your brain. And that's something to consider. Or if you do this all the time, there's a chance you could really damage a nerve in your neck. And people who do jujitsu have the same risk they need to be aware of. I genuinely am not seeing this many articles calling out people doing jujitsu as they are people who are doing sexual choking. I find it wild. Like, it's the same risk profile. And I will add, it is the same risk profile for chokes in jujitsu. So I know people who train jujitsu and they will tap early. They will tap out well before they're starting to black out because they are like, I am not taking a risk to my health in this way. This is how I'm engaging in this sport in a way that feels safe and within my risk tolerance. And I'm never going to compete. And I'm doing it to learn a sport. And it's a great time. And then you meet other people who are like, I'm going to work on my neck strength. I'm going to build my ability to live without oxygen. You know what I mean? Like, it is what it is. There's a lot of factors. And so I would say when you think about risk in kink, you want to think about risk in sport and make a parallel comparison in terms of what's your risk tolerance. If you do ballet for 20 years, you're risking your feet, you're risking your hip joints, long term pain in your back as a result of doing ballet in an ongoing way for a very long time. Same kind of risk profile. And sometimes you're not able to predict what that long term health problem might look like. So, how does that play into it? If you are already living with some sort of chronic disability, is that something that you are already used to, so you don't care? Or is it something that you're like, I can't take on more? So, that's one thing to think about in terms of a physical risk profile or assessment that you'd be thinking about.
Being informed, right?
Correct.
Understanding, yeah, as you go into it.
And then contextualizing it in a non stigmatizing way. So you're going to read things that are like consequences, death, and people are trying to make sure that you understand so you are informed and consenting to something. But how can we ever truly consent to something we've never tried before and don't know if we're going to like it or dislike it? How could you say with absolute certainty that you're informed if you had known that it would have gone wrong like that? Maybe you wouldn't have said yes. So, working within your own zones of risk tolerance. And it's not all or nothing. There's usually a lot of gray area, which then comes to the other part, which is emotional risk with this person at this place at this time. If something goes wrong, is this someone you trust to take care of that and take care of you? And I don't mean this just as a sub, right? Like, let's say you choking goes wrong and obviously the dom has to take care of the sub and deal with whatever. Let's say you're doing some form of shibari and you're doing shibari and something goes wrong where a nerve gets pinched and it hurts and like they cut you out of the rope, but you still went into panic first. Are they able to take care of you? That's part of it. But the other part is, let's say you do shibari and something goes wrong and you end up bruised. And honestly, like, you knew what you were getting into, but the person doing it feels so guilty and feels so much shame and starts to shame spiral. And like, genuinely, it's like, are you able to a certain extent? Obviously, if it's really bad, they go to their therapist and they should have a therapist and work it through with their therapist. But as a sub in that scenario, are you then able to take care of the potential ramifications of the dom feeling that level of guilt and shame around harming you when that was never the intent? This was supposed to be fun. And emotional risk could also be, because I don't want to just think about this in terms of a harm context. I think that that's like a trap that we usually fall into. The other emotional risk is attachment, bonding, falling in love with someone because of that attachment that you're not supposed to fall in love with, that you never wanted to fall in love with, because they elicit these very strong feelings in you. And the chemicals of this endorphin high is making you feel attached to this particular person and confusing that with we should be in a relationship.
Yeah, that one happens more often than we talk about and acknowledge, and it often flies under the radar of these talks. So I'm so glad that you brought that up because it's important to identify it and name it, right? And also anticipate in a way, right? How do I self care in that? When feelings arise or if feelings arise, how do I caretake? How do I communicate that with the other person, right? Or my people, right? Part of my caretaking could be, like you mentioned, a therapist, talking to my therapist. This came up, talking to other people in the kink community about, or, if you have that relationship with that person to be able to be like, hey, this was really deep for me and this is what I'm feeling.
Right. And I do think to a certain extent, you meet people who are new, who meet like, I don't know if they're inexperienced or just like your average, out of touch with their own feelings kind of Dom. And I will not make gendered accusations, but they do tend to be one particular gender. Not always, but frequently one particular gender. And that gender is a cisgendered man. And in those cases, that person will say, like, this actually ended up being deeper for me. And the guy's response is, okay, so, right? And that's kind of the attitude that you get, or like, well, this wasn't part of our agreement. And it's like, well, being able to hold someone through those feelings while still asserting your boundaries and what they can expect from you on a deeper relational level is really important. There's a really great kinky lifestyle coach in Ottawa that I love. Her name is Jamie Walker. We were having this conversation about how she deals with people going, well, it's not true emotional attachment. It's actually just trauma bonding. She's like, that's not trauma bonding. It's actually an intimacy bond. We need to look at, and so,
Ooh, I love that reframe. Yeah.
right. And she's like, a trauma bond is because it's a toxic, unhealthy relationship. This is actually something that you've done with someone in a state of such deep trust where you are putting yourself in a situation to go into fight or flight and then re regulate with this person after. And that process is really intimate. And when we pretend it isn't, you are doing a disservice to yourself and what you've done. Intimacy doesn't need to be a 20-year relationship. It doesn't need to lead to marriage, babies, house, kids. Like, intimacy doesn't mean that. And intimacy can be for a short span of time, but it is a very intimate feeling, especially when we're doing some of these more higher physical risk kinks. And that's something that's worth acknowledging.
Absolutely. Ah, yes, give it to us. I would love for you to speak a little bit more to choosing partners, kink partners. What are some things to look for, questions to ask, to know that, yes, this person can be comfortable, whether it's building something long term or, hey, I'm meeting you at a play party and we're cruising and we're vetting right away.
Yes. So I personally don't love pickup play for myself, but I will explain the parameters and context that I've seen it go well, if that helps. And I will say that for me, I do not like pickup play because I don't trust people that quickly with my body in the kink way. Because for me, like, doing kink is a very intimate thing where you're revealing parts of yourself that to me they're kind of private. So if you're like me, then great. And there's things that you can do. And if you're not like me and you don't care, then great. There's some other commonalities. So in terms of finding a partner, some of that's personal. You're going to have to build your own personal green flag, yellow flag, red flag. But the red flags in the kink world are people who do not know small moments of consent, no matter what. This could be a pushy sub or a dom that goes, when you're in the scene, well, we're going to push your limits after you've called yellow. You say yellow and they go, oh, you could do better than that. That's if you say yellow, that means we're supposed to slow down and check in, not say you can do better than that. Because if they don't respect your yellow, how are they going to respect your red? And your red is your stop, your safe word. Pushy subs are another thing. A really good example that I bring up all the time, because this was like being 19 and in these spaces and not knowing how to set my own boundaries. The foot fetishists who say, can I rub your feet? And then they're putting your whole foot in their mouth 1 second in. You're like, that is not a foot rub. That is not what I agreed to. That to me is a sign of an untrustworthy submissive. If you say one thing and then you do something different, like, doms can be people pleasers too. It's not like a dom is this wonderful human being who's completely evolved and is beyond their own personal experience of the world, right? Anyone can be a people pleaser. Anyone can be demanding.
Or that they're these like sadists and therefore means we just want to punish and we can't feel. Yep, exactly.
So one example that I think is a really good example in terms of the emotional dynamic would be something like if a dom says, listen, I'm happy to do this act with you, but I do not do humiliating talk. I don't like to humiliate. It doesn't feel right for me. And the sub's like, oh, but I want you to call me a spineless worm. And in the scene tries to be like, call me a spineless worm, call me a spineless worm. When the dom set a very clear boundary that I will not be doing that. That to me is a sign of this is a someone that's right. So you look for those small moments of consent negotiation. And that's blanket statement, something that you can take from whether it's pickup or long term. Another thing to think about is, once again, how do they handle aftercare? And are you aligned with that system, like their system of aftercare. And I say system because there's in the moment and then there's long term. And the moment might be we hug, we cuddle, I get you some electrolytes. And long term might be we do some sort of ongoing check in and maintain a friendly connection. We text once a week for a little bit. That's it, just to make sure that we're still feeling good about this. Because those check ins take what was a consensual experience and continues to make it a consensual experience where people don't regret it. But those pieces are what can turn a wonderful time to, I regret this. And that regret sometimes turns into this person is unsafe to, like, some people can't determine the difference between regret and unsafe to play. But that's a different, like, more complicated thing that we could get into. But I will say that, do you feel like the aftercare is what you were hoping for and looking for, both for the Dom and the sub in that dynamic? And whether the Dom is a dynamic, like a power dynamic, or just they were the one setting the pace of the act that you were doing. If it's like a splashing scene, are they the one laying out the strawberries on your body and the whipped cream and then like licking it off of you, right? The one doing in that context, or being worshipped with words, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think having those conversations about this is what I require for aftercare. This is my preferred aftercare. How do you feel about that? Before even initiating a scene and having that as part of the negotiation is so key because then you're setting the expectations, you're stating your needs, and that is able to also see this is a fit. And you're making sure that the other person is hearing what you're saying and knowing how to care for you because what is aftercare for one person may not be for another. So I think being really clear about that for yourself. What do I need coming into this? This is what I like. And being able to state that at the beginning is so helpful for everyone, you know?
Absolutely. I would also say a very common question that I get when I do my kink 101 or whenever I do a kink workshop of any kind is, well, how do I know my aftercare needs if I've never done this before? And that's a really great question. And I give these recommendations, which are you the kind of person who, when you are distressed, you want to be left alone or you want to be cuddled? And if you want to be cuddled, then you're probably going to want someone to cuddle with you and do words of reassurance and feed you water. I would say blanket statement, make sure the electrolytes are nearby. It's a natural reaction to sex and also some of the things that you might be doing that you'll be very sweaty. And so because of that, you're going to need to replenish your electrolytes. So like a Gatorade nearby is a really great, let's try a Gatorade. One other thing that I like to tell people is, what do you like? What brings you joy? Just put in your aftercare. If they're like, well, I don't need it, I just want it. I'm like, that is an aftercare requirement. You really want an O. Henry bar when you're done? You say, my aftercare needs are a Gatorade, an O. Henry bar, and then leave me alone. Or I want a Gatorade, an O. Henry bar, and then I want you to cuddle me while I eat it. You're going to unwrap it and stick it in my hand and pat the sweat off my body. So you can start with that, but start with what are the physical things your body might need in that moment. And then the emotions can come with it. And you can say very clearly, I'm actually figuring out still what my aftercare needs are. So I would like some flexibility. Are you going to be able to accommodate that? You don't have to say, I'm new, I've never done this. You can. I think that's really useful information. But even if you just say, I am still in the process of figuring out my aftercare needs. And so I'm going to give you a list of things I might need. And then we have to be flexible. And then that person would say to their partner, do you have aftercare needs? When I'm feeling regulated as a sub, as the Dom, is there anything you're going to need from me? And you go from there.
Yes, absolutely. And I love that too. Don't just assume that the sub is the only one that needs that aftercare, right? Like the DOMs, a lot of the times it is a lot of physical, could be emotional, psychological work as well. So definitely making sure that everybody is taken care of is so, so huge. I love that.
I'm just imagining, I'm remembering those DOMs who you see flogging for half an hour straight. And I'm like, once you're calm, once you're feeling good, offer them a little trap massage. Like, I'm sure their arm is really tired. Be like, hey, can I give you a massage and tell you about how much fun I had? And then the check-in is different than the aftercare. Your check-in of what did we like? What would we do again? What was too much? What do we want to push further next time? Because we recommend that you, if you're trying something new or doing it that day, like every day is different. So was it good or did you want it to be farther? Were you actually sad that there were limits and wish that we'd pushed a little harder than we did? So you have that conversation separate from the aftercare.
Yes, absolutely. It's so important to distinguish those two. You don't want to muddle those. But it's also important to not forget to check in. Have that check in. I think it's such an important aspect of kink, right? Is to have that check in, especially if it's someone that you're going to continue to play with. But even if you've only played with them once, and it could be like a day later, you know, or a few days later, or if it's a party after you've had aftercare and then half an hour later, like, you know,
Yes.
touch base.
Yeah. Before we forget, I want to circle back to the pickup play. So there's obviously like picking a long-term partner. You want to feel all of the usual things that you might feel. Like you want to be very clear on what you're expecting in terms of a long-term play partner. Is this part of dating, or is this part of just like a thing you do when you're at parties, or like you meet up just to do the kink? And so that's great. But if you're at a party, there's so many different consent 4Cs. And the one that I learned first, which is the one I think of, is like, consider yourself, communicate with a partner. There's collaboration's the last one. I don't remember one of the 4Cs, but I really like the idea of thinking, what do I want today with this person in this context? Are we in private at their house? They've invited me for a hookup. Are we at a public play party where there's people, an audience watching, right? Like it could be something where you're like, normally in private, I would love to do some sort of anal stretching type scene. But like in public, if things go awry there, that means you're shitting yourself, right? That's bad to do in public potentially. Not bad. It just might be more embarrassing. I don't want to say bad, but like I'm imagining accidentally like the lubey poo stream falling out because you douched, but it wasn't enough. That's not something I would probably enjoy having happen in public. But I know lots of other people who are like, I know I'm clean as a whistle and we're fine. I can do that. So is this something we are doing here in public with this particular person that I've just met? Do I feel safe with this person? And if you are the kind of person who is more anxious or potentially has trauma triggers, then you have to really check in like, am I nervous, excited? Am I just nervous, anxious? And if you are both, then you need to do less than you would like to do. And in those moments, set a timer. I'm going to do a scene with this person that's maybe 1 or 2 acts, and it's going to be 5 to 10 minutes. And when the timer goes off, we check in. Do we continue or do we stop? I'm actually a really big fan of you stop. You say, that was really fun. And then you give yourself time to process how you felt about that person. And if you felt good about it, you either find them again later that night, or you find them again at a party, or you exchange information in your FetLifes or your Instagrams, whatever you want to do. And you have those conversations about, let's do this again sometime and let's arrange it. And sometimes it can just be like a moment in time that was glorious that you live in and masturbate to for the rest of your life. And other times it's like the start of this ongoing, wonderful, kinky experience that you can have. So I would say things that are really easy to do as pickup play are rope bondage, shibari, because it's about the art of being tied, which is why you see so much of it, flogging and spanking. But those are not the only forms. Those are just the easiest 2. There's actually 2 that I really like that are fun. If you're into like primal play and there's mats, do like a short little wrestling thing. Massage is an amazing way of doing sensory play and connection and seeing how you connect with someone. I love using massage as a way to gauge someone's consent practices because like, there's always that one guy at the lifestyle club who's giving free massages. And they're like, do you want my wife to be right beside me? Would that make you feel more comfortable? And why don't you tell me which areas are on or off? And like, even when they're going to areas that are maybe near an area, they're like, is this too close? Would you like me to go harder? Like all that. So with massage, you can still play with intensity, soft scratches versus a deep muscle point trigger. Like if you're into Helga's House of Torture type massages in real life, find someone who enjoys that. I once met someone where they're like, I love giving hard massages and looking at that look of like pain management on their face. That's the interplay. And I was sitting there like, oh my God, I love when you give me a massage that hurts so much that like I might be bruised later. Now this is someone that I'm with at this party and I'm getting a free massage. We're both getting what we want. You know what I mean? Like, oh yeah, it was kink. Yeah, we checked in after. How did that feel? Great. Would do again. How did you feel? I'm like, I feel like I got a free massage and I was taking advantage of you. And he's like, you absolutely were not. Right?
Was like, I'm reveling in this. Love it. Love it. Yeah.
That's a really fun place to be. And that's a really low barrier to entry because your clothes don't even have to come off. Your fetish gear can stay on. And some people will come and bring oil and a towel. You can say, no, I don't want any oil. It's too messy. I don't want to stain my clothing. You can set boundaries there and see how they respond. There's lots of options for what you can do that have nothing to do with like the things that we stereotypically think you would do at pickup play at a kink party.
Oh God, I love those examples. And I'm wondering too, for people who may be entering kink or exploring new kinks, like when we're thinking about assessing risk, how do you teach them to separate accurate information out there in the interwebs versus porn-informed assumptions that they may have or misinformation on the interweb?
Yeah, so we live in a wonderful world where you can literally put in the words, the name of whatever the kink is, plus risk profile or like risks of blank. And you will find some dedicated kinkster who has written a treatise on the topic in detail. There's always someone who has written something. You may have to go down like a 2nd or 2 page in Google. You also, if you're not familiar with fetlife.com, it is like fetish Facebook. It has its problems. Not I personally use it for the events page, but there are also people out there who are like, I've done this and here's what I've learned. I have a friend who wrote a long thing about safe rope play, and he will not engage in rope with anyone if they have not read his blog post first. He's like, you must read this first before we will do any kind of rope together. He's put in things like choosing your type of rope, how to know if the rope is good, just simple things like that, where to find information. So, for example, if you're into rope, the Dutchie is a free website that you can pay access to for more rope techniques, but they have, what is your risk profile? What are the risks of doing this? All of that's on the website. So do not go to Pornhub and think that you know what you're doing because you saw it in a video. And I would say to a certain extent, romance novels can be very good at teaching kink and can be very bad at teaching kink. Like 50 Shades of Grey, very bad. That really in-depth Harry Snape fan fiction that I read that I get judged for by my friends for being obsessed with, right? There's like these pieces in those fan fictions that you're reading that are like step-by-step instructionals of how to do this safely. But how can you determine which one is a good fan fiction versus bad fan fiction? So in those cases, that is when you just Google that plus risk profile risk assessment. And that's going to be where they give you the considerations. They will probably not go over emotional considerations. You're going to have to determine that for yourself.
Yeah, such a key piece too. I'm glad that you keep on reiterating and reminding us about the emotional piece. Definitely consider that, people at home, when you're thinking about kinks and your own wishes, desires for the before, during, and after of kink play. Yes, yes. I'm loving all of this. Okay, so how do you help people like when we're thinking about like, risk tolerance, right? Because something might sound good in the moment, but you mentioned that feeling of regret that might come up, et cetera. How do people who are exploring new kinks or just getting into kink itself come to identify their own risk tolerance, also without shame, right? Or the fear spirals?
Well, I do think to a certain extent, some people feel regret because of internalized shame. They regret it because they feel shame after, and that shame is a very hard feeling, and that's what the regret comes from. Other people feel regret because the person wasn't the right person to do it with, and that's not on you. That's part of it. And I think other people just feel regret because they're like, shit, that went too far, and I wish that it hadn't. And so in those cases, you need a crystal ball to prevent that. We're not going to try to control for regret. We're going to figure out what we need to do to feel good and come back to a place of safety after we feel that regret. Like I feel to a certain extent like saying, oh, well, here's what you need to know so that you never feel regret is to a certain extent victim blaming or expecting people to be able to predict the future. And we just can't. So in those cases, it's identifying what specifically am I feeling regret around? Is it because I feel ashamed? And should I articulate that? I will tell a fun story with my husband that he will not get mad at me for sharing on this podcast. But there was one time where I got drunk and my dirty talk was off the charts. Like normally I'm like, it's bad. It's like a comedy show and like it ruins the mood. But when I'm drunk, all of a sudden, like there's a part of me that's unlocked. And the next day I was feeling a little bit embarrassed by the things I said. He had made a comment like, oh, last night you were pretty wild. And I was like, oh my God, why are you bringing that up? Why would you say that? And he was like, what's going on here? What's happening? He's like, are you embarrassed? It was hot. That was amazing. I want it again. And I was like, I
I
can't
love that.
guarantee it'll happen again, but I'm glad. And that got rid of, I was much younger. I met my husband when I was 23. So that is one example of how that aftercare, that's what the aftercare was. The noticing that I was embarrassed and having a partner that cared enough to help do that. So like, it can be so hard to say the words, I'm feeling a little embarrassed about what we did versus texting the words. Texting the words might be easier. So if you're feeling embarrassed and that embarrassment is leading to shame or regret, send a text. I'm feeling a little embarrassed. Like, how was that experience for you? And if they were just like, no, that was amazing. It was so connecting. I would love having our fantasies fulfilled. That was really hot for me. And that can be like a really good key for that.
What a great example of partner attunement, right? And checking in too, like that aftercare piece and the check in.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that people forget that check-ins can be proactive. They can be affirming things like, hey, do you remember 6 months ago when we did that? That was really hot and I love that. Can we do that again? Or like, hey, what do we have to do to bring back that? Like, can we use those specific key phrases that I really enjoyed again, maybe when you're sober this time? Things like that, right? Can we practice that? It just looks like being in a healthy relationship with someone and knowing what you want and asking for it. Sometimes you do something and you realize you really don't like it and you never want to do it again. Now you know. Now you have that information, and now you've determined a boundary. I will never call anyone a degrading term during sex. That feels bad. Or I didn't like being called a princess. or a slut or this other pet name, right? Or, you know what? I thought that massage was a really great way to do pickup play, but it turns out that having any stranger touch my body like that in a group setting that I don't know is really uncomfortable for me. So maybe I'm not going to do pickup play and I'm going to build relationships with people that are kinky and friendships that over time I can say, okay, I'm curious and I want to try. When you have a bad feeling, figuring out why you feel that bad feeling helps you figure out what your boundaries are going forward.
Yes, I love that too. And I was thinking, like, for me, aftercare, I need a cuddle. I need you to cuddle me. I need you to hold me, in addition to like get me water, all the things. But I know some people, that's a huge boundary for them. Like, do not cuddle me unless I'm in a relationship with you, but it's again with that attunement. And all of this is like, you're learning, right? It's an exploration, but tuning into like, what feels off and why and what changes and things to do to adapt to going forward.
I think also, to a certain extent, when we do these things, because there's such a higher risk of something going physically wrong, we talk about it like, how do we avoid things going wrong? How do we avoid STIs with condoms? How do we avoid the things going wrong? And the relational piece of this is, how do we respond when they do? What are the expectations, the behavioral expectations of each other when something goes wrong? And behavioral is also emotional. Am I expecting you to cuddle me? Or am I expecting you to affirm me? Am I expecting you to check in with me more consistently? And if you're an ADHD person, put reminders in your calendar to text me every day and check up and things like that. What am I actually expecting when things go wrong? Not just when things go right. It's easy when things go right. Maybe you go, that was great. And then I will also add to a certain extent, things going wrong is something went really right. And you had a good time and you want to see them again, but they don't want to see you again for whatever reason. For them, it was a one time thing and it was beautiful, but they're not interested in continuing this. And that rejection can feel bad. So, how do you handle that rejection? Like, it's just being human. And so, instead of trying to say, how do I avoid every instance of a bad feeling or a thing going bad? It's what can I do in those moments that will make the bad feeling feel better, that will make this better and able for me to recover.
Yes, give it to us. Hello. For people who are kink curious but overwhelmed, what is a safe grounding first step that you want to give and empower our loves out there with?
Go to a kink party and don't do anything. Just watch, be in the environment, watch other people, talk to strangers, make friends. I think being in a real world kink situation, first of all, is not like the movies, not like porn, and you're going to see how different it is. But to another certain extent, if you have a partner and you're interested in trying kink, then you want to go and start with porn to figure out what you're curious about, and then go do your Googling on how to do this safely and pick the lowest, slowest, chillest version of it to try. You're interested in being tied up? Okay. Start just like with being tied to the bed with a safe rope, or I like the top sheet. When your top sheet has no stretch in it, you can use that because it's like soft and bulky and you can make sure it's not too tight and you can cut it off of someone. Maybe start with just tying the person with like a bed sheet to the bed frame, or get those really cheap under the bed suspension ones that are like Velcro. I think it's by Sport Sheets. They have some really good safe beginner entry restraint systems. So pick something that's easy to get out of. Start with the hand on the throat rather than the full choke. Start maybe thinking of, are you interested in a power dynamic or sensory play? If it's about a sensation, the lowest version of the sensation. If it's about a power dynamic, start with a little bit of like, what are they calling you when they fuck you? How does it feel to be called that in a sexual situation? That would be my like very beginner things to get started. And then if you can, check out a party if that's accessible to you.
If it's accessible and desirable to you. And just because you go to a party, like I think a common misconception is that I go to a party, I have to have sex. Like, no. Or that I have to experience what's on offer because it could be a kink play party where there's just kink and there's no actual sex happening. But we love some voyeurism, right? You can go just to observe.
I've been to so many kink parties in smaller venues that have like a kitchen or a snack table, and you end up all of you in your fetish gear standing around the kitchen table having your kitchen party while everyone else is doing whatever they're doing around you. And that's also an option. And you can leave. You can go to the party and go, I am not having a fun time. I'm tired, or this is overstimulating, or this isn't what I thought it was going to be. You can leave. No one says you have to stay till the end.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. But you're not going to know unless you go, right?
Correct.
Yes, fabulous. Thank you for taking us on this journey of risk and kink. Before we wrap up, we love to come to completion here at Come Talk with Aimee. Ray, are you ready to come to completion?
I am ready to complete with you.
Yes. All right. Question number one. Kink tastes like blank.
Dark cherry ice cream.
Yummy. Ooh, I had a visual, not just a taste of that. All right. The first spark is usually curiosity, desire, or something else.
For some people, desire. For some people, curiosity. And for other people, they had a friend who took them and now they're addicted.
Check, check, check. Know yourself. Okay. A kink myth that deserves to be completely undressed.
That you have to be aggressive and violent in order to be doing kink. Lots of kink is very soft, gentle, and loving.
Yes, absolutely. Woo. One sensation people don't realize can feel erotic.
Having food eaten off of your body. Not everyone's into that, but for the people that are, oh man, that one's fun.
Yes. Ooh, mine is electric play. But I'm like, ooh, I love electric play. People are like, you want to be electrocuted? I've gotten that so much. And I'm like, that's not really what it is, but okay.
It's like, yeah, I'm taking my fork and I'm just shoving it into the socket and going, what? Yeah.
Yeah. They're like, that sounds awful.
Yeah, you and I both picked opposite ends of the kink spectrum. You're like, mine is this, and then I'm like, mine is about food.
All right. Risk shows up in the body as.
Shaking and a general sense of tightness in your chest and throat area.
I love that. Yeah. Whatever resistance feels like to
Yeah,
you.
like faint tremors, not like a full body shake, but like a slight anxiety tremor feeling. Your adrenaline is going through your body because you're feeling like this could be dangerous.
Well, it's like that flight, fight, freeze, right?
Yes, correct. And that can show up because this person or this act.
Yes, absolutely. All right. Consent sounds like blank in real life.
It's a tone of voice paired with a physical action. The tone of voice sounds like it's engaged, and the body is engaged to go with that tone.
I love that. Yes, because it's so content specific.
Go watch Off Campus for really good examples.
Okay. Kink exploration feels like blank.
A buffet. The kind you do a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and then you figure what you like. You heap that plate up for seconds.
Is it a buffet off of somebody? Maybe. Okay. The most forgotten part of aftercare.
The later check-in.
Yes, absolutely. All right. Play without pressure feels like blank.
Freedom.
So fucking free, so fucking fabulous. Safe enough to surrender means.
That you feel like you can trust this person with your deepest, darkest fantasies, fears, and know that when you set an expectation, they'll meet it.
Yes. Ooh, safe to explore all of that yumminess. I love it. Okay, a desire people are most afraid to admit.
Consensual non-consent. Although I will say that one's becoming a lot more common to talk about in like book talk circles and in kink spaces. But I would say for like someone who's brand new to it, there's so much shame around I'm interested in being taken advantage of in a role play situation because of all of the victim blaming that we have when it comes to actual survivors of sexual assault. And if you're a survivor of sexual assault, which 1 in 3 women are and 1 in 5 men are, then that also means that there's a lot of shame around, well, is this because of that? And that makes it very hard to admit to. And I'm here to tell you that there is a high chance that even if you weren't sexually assaulted, you would still be into CNC. It's a very common kink.
Whew, thank you for all of that. Okay, final question. Finish this sentence. You're kinkier than you think because.
Kink isn't just the hardcore things where you could die. It's also just sensation play where you're playing with intensity from lighter to harder. Massage could be kink. Eating food together could be kink. Anything can be kink depending on the context, the parameters, and all of those other things that we talked about on the pod today.
Yes, you're all kinky out there. Go find your kinks today. Rae, thank you for bringing this discussion. Thank you for coming on Come Talk with Aimee. Where can people find you at home?
My website is sharewithrae.com. If you want to see photos of me in very little clothing and get some just fun sex out of whatever I'm thinking about, follow me at WifeBayRae on Instagram. And if you want non-monogamy specific content, that account is Share with Rae.
Fabulous. We'll definitely have that linked in the show notes. Everyone at home, thank you so much for tuning in. We love you. You're fabulous. We want to hear what you're taking away when it comes to risk and kink and play. And if there's anything you want to add to this dialogue that you want to give to the people as well, hit us up in our DMs, put it in the comments. We love you. Remember to masturbate, lubricate, and get ate. Thank you for coming. Please come again, and come again.
That's all for today, lover. Remember to masturbate, lubricate, and get ate. If you liked this episode, share with a friend, like, subscribe, and as always, thank you for coming. Please come again, and come again.